When they left me alone on that dark road with the sound of crickets as my only company and the cold early morning air cutting my skin, I didn't cry. I simply took out my phone, dialed 3 numbers, and in less than 10 minutes, I cancelled everything I had paid for that damn family. The luxury hotels where they planned to stay, the exclusive restaurants I had reserved, the additional credit cards they thought were theirs forever, everything. While they drove away laughing in the car I had rented, thinking they had left me ruined, I was already planning how they were going to spend the longest night of their lives. But it had all started so differently. 3 months ago, when I decided to organize this family trip, my house smelled of cinnamon and freshly brewed coffee. It was a Sunday morning, and the golden light filtered through the lace curtains I had embroidered myself years ago. Michael, my son, was sitting on the blue velvet sofa where his father used to read the newspaper. Linda, mid-daughter-in-law, pretended to admire the family photos on the mantel. But I noticed how her eyes calculated the value of each silver frame of each piece of china I had inherited from my mother Stella. My 17-year-old granddaughter was the only one who seemed genuinely happy to be there. Her eyes sparkled when I showed her the photos of the resort on the coast, the excursions I had planned, the oceanfront restaurants where we would eat fresh seafood. But even then, something in Linda's smile unsettled me. It was too wide, too perfect, as if she were posing for a photograph that would never be taken. Mom, this must be costing you a fortune, Michael had said. But not with concern, with a strange curiosity. As if he were evaluating my finances, Linda nodded beside him, her fingers drumming softly on the leather purse I had given her the year before. Yes, Jane, are you sure you can afford all this? I should have noticed the tone then. It wasn't affection. It was an investigation. But I just wanted to get my family back to feel again that I had a purpose after so many years of loneliness since I became a widow. So, I smiled and told them not to worry, that I had saved my whole life for moments like this. Over the next few weeks, as I planned every detail of the trip, I started to notice things. Whispered calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room, knowing glances between Linda and Michael during family dinners. Linda had started asking me about my bank accounts. About whether I had a will, about who managed my important documents, all disguised as daughterly concern. But I had lived too long not to recognize greed when it was right in front of me. The week before the trip, Linda came to my house with a folder full of papers. Jane, you dear, she said in that syrupy voice she used when she wanted something. Michael and I have been thinking, at your age, maybe it would be better if someone younger managed your finances just to protect you. Of course, the documents were powers of attorney, account transfers, changes to the beneficiaries of my insurance policies. All very legal, all very convenient for them. That night, while they thought I was asleep, I heard them planning. Linda talked about properties they could sell, investments they could make, how I was losing my faculties and needed protection. Michael, my own son, agreed with every word as if it were the most natural thing in the world. They talked about me as if I were already gone, as if my only purpose was to finance their dreams of wealth. That's when I knew this trip wouldn't be a reconciliation. It would be a test, the last chance to see if there was anything left of the family I had raised, or if they were just strangers waiting for my inheritance. The day of our departure arrived with a fine rain that tapped against my windows like impatient little fingers. I had packed my suitcase the night before, folding each garment with the care of someone who knows they might not return the same way. The lavender scent from my drawers clung to the clothes like a final hug from home. Linda and Michael arrived on time, but something in their movements seemed strange, too coordinated, as if they had rehearsed every gesture. Ready for the adventure, Mom? Michael asked, carrying my suitcase with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Linda was constantly checking her phone, her red-painted nails tapping against the screen. Stella jumped out of the car and hugged me with the enthusiasm of her 17 years. But even she seemed quieter than usual. During the drive to the coast, I sat in the back seat watching Linda whisper things to Michael as he drove. Every time I made a comment about the hotels or the reservations, they exchanged those looks I already knew too well. Linda had started calling me Dear Jane with a frequency that set my teeth on edge. People who love you don't need to remind you of it every 5 minutes. We stopped at a gas station after a 3-hour drive. While Michael filled the tank, I went to the restroom and heard Linda talking on the phone in a low voice. Yes, everything is going according to plan. She doesn't suspect a thing. Tomorrow night will be perfect when she's more tired and confused. My blood ran cold. Plan? What plan? I returned to the car, pretending I hadn't heard anything, but me mind was already racing. I discreetly took out my phone and checked my bank accounts, my cards, the confirmations for all the reservations. Everything was under my control. Everything was still in my name. But what did they have planned? We arrived at the first hotel at sunset. It was a beautiful place facing the sea with palm trees swaying gently in the salty breeze. The lobby smelled of tropical flowers and polished wood. When I approached the front desk to check in, Linda stepped ahead of me. "Let me, Jane, you must be tired from the trip." "Good evening," she said to the clerk with her best smile. "We're here to check in. The reservation is under Jane Miller, the suite and 2 standard rooms. I'll need a credit card for incidentals." I reached out my hand to give him my card, but Linda intercepted it. "Oh, better use this one," she said, handing over a gold card I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Miller prefers to use this account for travel." The clerk took the card without question, but I froze. Since when did Linda have a card in my name that I knew nothing about? That night at the hotel dinner, Linda insisted on ordering the most expensive dishes on the menu. "Come on, Jane. You're paying for everything. We should enjoy it." But there was something in her tone that bothered me. It wasn't gratitude. It was entitlement, as if she already considered my money her own. After dinner, Michael walked me to my room. "Mom," he said in the hallway. "Tomorrow, Linda and I want to talk to you about something important, about your future, about how we can better help you." His words sounded rehearsed, mechanical. "We think you've been very stressed lately, a little scattered. It's not your fault. It's normal at your age." I closed the door to my room with me heart pounding. Scattered. That word followed me as I got ready for bed. I checked my purse twice, confirmed my phone was charged, and made sure I had all my important documents. Something told me I was going to need them. At 2 o'clock in the morning, I heard voices in the hallway. Linda and Michael were talking outside my door. "It has to be tomorrow," Linda was saying. "The longer we wait, the more risk there is that she'll figure it out." "But Mom's not stupid," Michael replied in a tone I had never heard before. Cold and calculating. "We have to make it look natural, as if it's her decision." I moved closer to the door and pressed my ear against it. "The place you chose is perfect," Linda continued. "Far from everything, no cell signal, no witnesses. When we leave her there, she'll understand she has no choice but to do what we say." "And if she refuses?" Michael asked. "She won't refuse. She'll be scared alone without money. She'll sign anything we put in front of her." I backed away from the door, my legs shaking. I understood the plan now. They were going to take me somewhere isolated. They were going to abandon me so I would sign the documents Linda had brought. They thought that without money, without help, without options, I would become vulnerable and desperate. But what they didn't know was that I grew up in a time when women had to be smarter than men to survive. And that from the moment I heard that first whispered conversation, I also had my own plan. The next morning dawned with a clear sky that contrasted brutally with the storm brewing in my chest. I woke up before dawn, as had always been my habit since I was young and worked in my father's bakery. The silence of the hotel allowed me to think clearly as I watched the sunrise paint the ocean orange. I knew today would be the day. I could feel it in every fiber of my being. During breakfast, Linda was especially attentive to me. She poured my coffee, spread jam on my toast, asked if I had slept well. Her performance was perfect, but I already knew the script. Michael was constantly checking his phone as if coordinating something. Stella. My poor granddaughter ate insolence. But I noticed how she glanced at me from time to time with a worry she couldn't hide. "Jane, dear," Linda said delicately, wiping her lips with a napkin. "Michael and I thought it would be nice to take a special excursion today. We know a beautiful place, very quiet, where we can talk about those important things we mentioned yesterday." Her smile was radiant, but her eyes had that coldness I had learned to recognize. "Yeah, Mom," Michael added. "It's a place Linda discovered last year. Very private, very special, perfect for intimate family conversations." The word private echoed in my head like an alarm bell. Private meant isolated, isolated meant no witnesses. I agreed with the sweetness of a naive grandmother. But while they finished their breakfast, I was mentally reviewing every detail of my own plan. I had spent the early morning awake, not out of fear, but organizing every move I would make from that moment on. I had everything ready on my phone. Emergency numbers, screenshots of all my accounts, voice recorder activated. We got into the rented car around 10 in the morning. Michael drove with the false confidence of someone who thinks they have everything under control. Linda was checking a map on her phone, giving him directions to that special place they had chosen. I sat in the back with Stella, who remained strangely silent, nervously fiddling with her bracelets. "Grandma," Stella whispered to me when her parents were distracted arguing about the route. "Are you okay?" "Last night, I heard Mom and Dad talking," and she couldn't finish the sentence, but her eyes told me everything I needed to know. My granddaughter had heard the same conversation I had. The fear on her face broke my heart. I squeezed her hand gently and smiled at her. "Everything is going to be okay, my love. Grandma knows how to take care of herself." Stella nodded, but I saw a silent tear roll down her cheek. She knew what was about to happen, but she was just a child caught between loyalty to her parents and love for her grandmother. The journey felt longer than usual. We left the main highway and turned onto secondary roads, then onto dirt paths that kicked up dust around the car. The trees grew denser, the houses scarcer until finally there was nothing but wild vegetation and silence. Linda constantly checked her phone and nodded with satisfaction. "Perfect. No signal here. It will be Avery private conversation." We finally stopped in a clearing next to what looked like an old abandoned gas station. The place was desolate with weeds growing between the rusted pumps and broken windows reflecting fragments off the sky like blind eyes. Linda and Michael got out of the car with a strange energy like actors finally arriving at the main scene of their play. "Come on, Jane," Linda said in that syrupy voice that now made me nauseous. "Let's walk a bit. We need some fresh air for this very important conversation." Michael took a folder out of the car, the same folder full of papers Linda had brought to my house weeks ago. Stella stayed in the car, but I saw her in the rearview mirror wiping away tears. My heart broke for her because I knew she was about to lose her parents in a way she could never have imagined. We walked to an area where there were some large rocks that could serve as makeshift seats. Linda spread out a blanket she had brought to make it more comfortable, but I knew it was all for the staging of her grand moment. The silence of the place was absolute, broken only by the sound of the wind through the dry leaves. "Well, Jane," Michael began sitting in front of me with the folder in his hands. "It's time we talked seriously about your situation." Linda sat beside him, and for the first time on the whole trip, their masks began to fall away. There were no more fake smiles or sweet words. "Your financial situation worries us a lot." Linda continued in a completely different tone, colder, more direct. "A woman your age with so much money living alone. It's dangerous. There are a lot of bad people who take advantage of the elderly." The irony of her words would have made me laugh if the moment hadn't been so sinister. Michael opened the folder and spread the documents on the blanket. Powers of attorney, bank transfers, beneficiary changes. It was all there waiting for my signature. "Mom, you need to sign these papers. It's for your own good to protect you." His voice sounded mechanical, rehearsed. I looked at them both in silence for a long moment. Linda tapped her red nails against her purse. Michael avoided my gaze. The wind moved the dry leaves around us with a whisper that sounded like a warning. Then I took out my phone. "Before I sign anything," I said with a calmness that surprised even me, "I need to make a call." Linda stiffened when she saw my phone. "Jane, dear, there's no signal here," she said with a nervous laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "We already checked. It's better if we focus on this very important conversation," but I had already dialed the number, and to her horror, the call connected perfectly. "Mr. Roberts, this is Jane Miller." "Yes, the one whose will we updated last week." Michael's face fell. Linda tried to snatch the phone from me, but I moved away with an agility they didn't know I still had. "I'm here with my son and daughter-in-law, who insist that I sign some documents. Could you explain to them the current legal status of my assets?" I put the phone on speaker, and Mr. Roberts's voice filled that desolate place like a thunderclap. "Mrs. Miller, as we agreed, you maintain full control of all your assets. Any document presented to you without my supervision would be legally invalid. Furthermore, EHAVE recorded our conversations where you express your suspicions about possible fraud attempts by family members." The silence that followed was deafening. Linda had lost all the color in her face. Michael stared at the papers as if they had come to life. "Thank you, Mr. Roberts. I'll keep you informed." I hung up and looked at them with a tranquility I had been cultivating for weeks. "Did you really think I was that naive?" I asked as I put my phone away. "Did you think that a woman who built a business from scratch, who raised a son alone after being widowed, who survived economic crises and betrayals, wouldn't see through your little act. Linda was the first to react, and her loving daughter-in-law mask crumbled completely. "Listen to me, you stupid old woman," she hissed in a voice she had never used in front of me before. "Are you going to sign these papers right now, or are you going to regret it? We brought you here because you have no other choice." Michael nodded, his true face, emerging like a snake, shedding its skin. "Mom, don't be difficult. No one is coming to help you here. There are no houses, no phones, no nothing. Either you sign or you stay here until you change your mind." I stood up slowly from the blanket, brushing the dry leaves off my dress. "Do you know what's saddest about all of this?" I said, looking them in the eyes alternately. "It's not that you want Torb me. It's that you truly believed I was foolish enough to fall into your trap." I took out my phone again and showed them the screen. "This call has been recording since we got here. Your threats, your plan to abandon me, it's all documented." Linda tried to grab my phone again, but I had already sent the recording to 3 different contacts. Besides, I continued walking toward the car where Stella was watching us with tears in her eyes. "Did you really think I would come to an isolated place without taking precautions? Mr. Roberts knows exactly where we are. If I didn't return or confirm I'm okay in an hour, he will contact the authorities." Michael ran after me. "Mom, wait. It doesn't have to be this way. We can talk. We can reach an agreement." But his voice had lost all authority. Now he was the scared little boy I remembered from his childhood when I caught him lying about his school grades. "The only possible agreement," I said, stopping before I reached the car, "is that you take me back to the hotel right now, pack your things, and disappear from my life forever." Linda approached, her eyes filled with rage. "And if we refuse, what if we leave you here just like we planned?" I smiled for the first time all day. A smile I had learned from my mother when she faced abusive debt collectors in tough times. "Then you're going to find out what it feels like to be completely broke in a strange place." I took out my phone again and opened my banking app. "You see this gold card you used for the hotel yesterday, Linda? It's an authorized user card on my account which I can cancel with one click." Her eyes widened as she understood the implications. "The car we're driving is rented on my credit card. The hotel rooms are booked in my name. Your return flights are paid for with my money." "Jane." Michael palled. "You wouldn't do that. We're your family." "My family wouldn't have brought me to an isolated place to threaten and rob me," I replied with a firmness that came from the depths of my soul. "My family wouldn't have planned to abandon me on a dark road. You stopped being my family the moment you decided my money was more important than my well-being." Linda screamed with a frustration she could no longer contain. "You're a selfish old woman. All that money is going to be ours when you die anyway. We're just speeding up the inevitable." "Exactly," I said, walking to the car door. "It was going to be yours, past tense. Because last night, while you were planning to abandon me, I changed my will. Stella will be my sole heir when she turns 25. Until then, everything will go to charity." The silence that followed was like a tomb. Michael slumped onto the rocks where they had spread their useless documents. Linda began to cry, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of pure rage. I opened the car door where Stella was waiting for me. "Come on, my love," I said to my granddaughter. "It's time you met your real family." Stella hugged me the moment I got in the car, her tears soaking my blouse as she trembled like a leaf in a storm. "Grandma, I'm so sorry." She sobbed against my shoulder. "I knew something bad was going to happen. But I didn't know how to warn you without betraying my parents." I stroked her hair with the tenderness I had reserved for her since she was born, feeling my heart break for this innocent child caught in the middle of her parents' greed. "You have nothing to apologize for, my sweet girl," I whispered as Linda and Michael argued outside the car, their voices getting louder and louder. "You're the only one who kept your heart pure through all of this." Stella pulled away from me and looked at me with those eyes she had inherited from her grandfather, full of a premature wisdom that the situation had forced upon her. "Is it true what you said about the will?" she asked in a trembling voice. "Are you really leaving everything to me?" I took her hands in mine, feeling how cold they were despite the heat of the day. "It's true, but I hope you understand. It's not just about the money. It's about preserving the values your great-grandmother taught me, the same ones I tried to instill in your father and which he chose to forget." Outside, Linda had started banging on the car windows. "Stella, get out of there right now. That manipulative old woman is filling your head with lies." Her face was twisted with a rage that made her unrecognizable. Michael tried to calm her down, but I could see in his gestures that he was desperate, too. I started the car with the keys they had left in the ignition, confident that I wouldn't know how to drive or wouldn't dare to leave them. How little they knew the woman who had driven delivery trucks when the family business required it. "Grandma, what are you doing?" Stella asked as I adjusted the mirrors with the precision of someone who had been driving for decades. "What should have been done a long time ago, my love, protecting us both." I rolled down the window just enough for Linda and Michael to hear me. "You have two options," I shouted over the sound of the engine. "You can walk to the main road and find help, or you can stay here and reflect on your choices. Either way, Stella and I are leaving." Linda clung to the door handle like a desperate woman. "You can't take Midotter. She's a minor. I'll sue you for kidnapping." But her threat sounded hollow, even to her. Stella spoke from the passenger seat with a voice that sounded more mature than her 17 years should allow. "Mom, Dad," she said, looking at them through the glass. "Ika's to go with Grandma. You tried to hurt the only person who truly loves us unconditionally." My granddaughter's words were like daggers to Linda, who finally let go of the handle and stepped back as if the car were on fire. I put the car in drive and we started to move away slowly down the dusty path. In the rearview mirror, I saw Linda running after us, screaming incoherently while Michael stood motionless among the scattered papers that the wind was starting to carry away. It was an image that would be etched in my memory forever. My predators reduced to what they really were, desperate, empty people without my money to support them. "Where are we going, Grandma?" Stella asked as I navigated back toward the main highway. "First, we're going to get our things from the hotel," I replied, feeling the tension of the past few weeks finally begin to leave my shoulders. "Then, we're going to cancel their rooms and their return flights. Let them find their own way home." During the drive back, Stella told me everything she had observed over the past weeks. How Linda had been photographing documents in my house, how they had been rehearsing conversations about my mental decline, how they had planned to use my own words about feeling lonely to justify their takeover. My granddaughter had been a silent witness to her parents' every move, carrying the weight of that terrible knowledge. "Why didn't you tell me anything sooner?" I asked as we entered the hotel parking lot. Stella looked down ashamed. "Because they're my parents, Grandma. I thought maybe I was misunderstanding things, that maybe they really were worried about you." Her voice broke at the end of the sentence. "My love," I said, stopping before getting out of the car. "What you've just been through will teach you the most important lesson of your life. Real family isn't the one who shares your blood. It's the one who respects your dignity. Remember that forever." We walked into the hotel holding hands like two generations of women who had survived a betrayal. The front desk staff greeted us with professional smiles, unaware they were witnessing the moment a grandmother and her granddaughter became the only true allies they would have in the world. As we rode the elevator up to our rooms, Stella asked me in a very small voice, "Grandma, do you think Mom and Dad will ever understand what they did wrong?" I looked at her through the reflection in the metal elevator doors and saw in her eyes the same hope I had held for years. "I don't know, my sweet girl," I answered honestly. "But it's no longer our responsibility to teach them. We're ached our rooms." And I began to pack with the efficiency of someone who had made a final decision. Every piece of clothing I folded, every object I packed felt like a small act of liberation. Stella helped me in silence. But I could see in her movements the confusion of a teenager who had just seen her parents reveal their true nature. I went down to the reception with my suitcase and asked the manager to accompany me to a private area. "I need to cancel 2 rooms and make some changes to the payment methods," I explained with the calm of someone who had planned every move. The man, a middle-aged gentleman with glasses, listened to me attentively as I explained that there was a family issue, and that 2 of the guests would no longer be responsible for any expenses. "I also need to cancel all the additional cards associated with my account," I continued as I took out my phone to call the bank. "It's a family security measure." The manager nodded with professional discretion, though I could see the curiosity in his eyes. In hotels like this, he had surely seen many family dramas. While I was making the necessary calls, I heard the sound of a car arriving in the parking lot. Through the lobby window, I saw a beat-up taxi from which Linda and Michael got out, both covered in dust and with expressions of absolute fury. Linda was walking with a slight limp, probably from trying to run on the rocky path in heels. "Ma'am," the manager said to me after finishing the paperwork. The other guests have just arrived. Is there anything else you need to do before they come up? I smiled with a calmness that surprised even me. Yes, please inform them that their rooms have been cancelled and they are no longer authorized to charge expenses to my account. If they wish to continue their stay, they will need to make their own reservations and payments. The moment had arrived. Linda and Michael burst into the lobby like a storm, their clothes disheveled and their faces marked by the walk under the sun. Linda headed straight for me with an aggression that made other guests turn to look. "Where is my daughter?" she demanded in a loud voice, not caring about the scene she was causing. "Stella's safe," I replied without losing my composure. "And she has decided of her own free will to stay with me." Michael tried a different approach, coming closer with his hands outstretched as if to hug me. "Mom, please let's talk calmly. We're all upset, but we're family." "Family doesn't abandon its members on dark roads," I replied, avoiding his fake hug. "Family doesn't plan theft or threaten its elders." Linda lost the last remnants of her composure. "You robbed us. You left us without money, without a car in the middle of nowhere." "I gave you exactly what you were going to give me," I retorted as the hotel manager discreetly approached, clearly prepared to intervene if the situation escalated. "The difference is that you deserve to be alone and helpless. I didn't." Stella appeared at that moment, coming down the stairs with her own suitcase. The image of my granddaughter walking toward us with quiet determination was like seeing a young version of myself. Linda ran to her. "Stella, tell this crazy woman you're coming back with us immediately." But my granddaughter stopped halfway down the stairs and spoke with a voice that echoed throughout the lobby. "Mom, Dad, I heard you planning to hurt Grandma. I heard you talk about her as if she were already dead. I heard you decide to abandon her to rob her." Each word was like a slap to Linda and Michael. "Stella, you don't understand the whole situation." Michael tried to explain, but his daughter cut him off with a maturity that filled me with both pride and pain. "I understand perfectly. I understand that you chose money over love. I understand that you were willing to traumatize your own mother to get what you wanted." Linda tried one last desperate resort. "This is manipulation. That old woman is poisoning my daughter against us." But even as she screamed, I could see in her eyes that she knew she had lost. Not just my money, but her daughter, her dignity, and any chance of redemption. The hotel manager finally stepped in. "Sir, ma'am, I'm going to Javi to ask you to lower your voices or continue this conversation elsewhere. You're disturbing the other guests." Linda glared at him with contempt, but Michael had the decency to look ashamed. "Don't worry," I said to the manager and the other guests who were watching discreetly. "We're leaving now." I took Stella's hand and we walked toward the exit. Linda followed us, screaming legal threats, promises off lawsuit, swearing that this wasn't over. At the hotel door, I stopped and turned to them one last time. "Linda, Michael," I said with a voice that carried decades of experience and wisdom. "You're going to have a lot of time to reflect on your decisions. I hope you eventually understand that true love has no price and that by trying to put one on it, you lost the only thing that truly mattered." Michael took a step toward me and for a moment I saw a glimmer of the boy I had raised. "Mom, is there no way to fix this?" His voice broke slightly, and I almost felt sorry for him. "Almost, son," I said with a sadness that came from the depths of my heart. "You didn't want to fix anything when you had the chance, you wanted to take by force what you had never earned with love." We left the hotel and got into the car I had rented in my name. Behind us, Linda was still shouting, but her words were lost in the wind like dry leaves. Stella and I got into the car in silence. And as I started it, we began to drive away. I saw in the rearview mirror my former family standing at the hotel entrance, reduced to two lonely figures without money, without transportation, and without dignity. For the first time in months, I took a deep breath and felt something like peace. We drove for 2 hours in a comfortable silence before Stella finally asked where we were headed. The landscape had changed from the tropical coast to green mountains dotted with small colonial towns that looked like something out of a postcard. "There's a place your grandfather and I discovered many years ago," I explained as I took a turn onto a winding road, "a small family-owned inn where no one will bother us while we decide what to do with our lives." The Serenity Inn appeared before us like an oasis after so many hours of tension. It was an old adobe and red-tiled building surrounded by gardens full of bougainvillea, and the scent of jasmine floated on the afternoon air. The woman who greeted us, a sturdy woman in her 50s with a genuine smile, treated us as if we were expected guests rather than refugees from a family drama. Will you need separate or connecting rooms? She asked, checking availability in an old-fashioned registration book, not a modern computer. Connecting, please, I replied, feeling Stella relax beside me. My granddaughter and I need to be close to each other for a while. That night, we had dinner on the inn's terrace under paper lanterns that swayed gently in the mountain breeze. Stella had regained some color in her cheeks, and for the first time all day, she smiled when the waitress brought her a special house dessert. "Grandma," she said as we shared a homemade flan. "Do you think I did the right thing by choosing to stay with you?" "My love," I replied, taking her hand across the table. "What you did was choose respect over convenience. You chose true love over comfort. Those are always the right decisions, even when they're the hardest." Stella nodded. Booty could see in her eyes that she was still struggling with the guilt of having betrayed her parents. Over the next few days, we established a routine that helped us both to heal. We had breakfast early in the garden, walked the mountain trails, and in the afternoons, we sat in the inn's library, where Stella did her schoolwork she had downloaded online. And I read books I hadn't had time to enjoy in years. It was during one of those quiet afternoons that my phone began to ring insistently. Linda and Michael had managed to get back to the city and were now launching their counterattack. The calls came one after another. Legal threats, desperate pleas, attempts at emotional manipulation. "Mom, Stella is missing school. You're taking her away from her normal life," Michael's voice said in one of the voicemails. Stella listened to some of these messages and her face darkened. "Grandma, maybe I should go back. I don't want to cause you legal trouble." But I had already spoken with Mr. Roberts, who had assured me that as a grandmother, I had legal rights, especially considering Stella had voluntarily expressed her desire to be with me, and that there were recordings of her parents planning fraudulent activities. "The only legal trouble they're going to have is if they continue to harass us," I assured my granddaughter as I blocked Linda's and Michael's numbers. "Besides, you are studying. You are safe and you are learning more about life in these weeks than in years of living with that toxicity." One morning, as we were having breakfast in the garden, Stella asked me the question I had been avoiding since we left the hotel on the coast. "Grandma, are you really going to let Mom and Dad end up with nothing?" Her voice held no judgment, only genuine curiosity about me intentions. I set my coffee cup down on the table and looked out at the mountains stretching into the distance. "My love, what I did was protect what was rightfully mine. They still have their jobs, their skills, their youth. What they lost was easy access to money they never earned." I paused before continuing. "But if they prove that they have truly changed, that they understand what they did wrong, maybe in the future I can reconsider some things." Stella nodded slowly. "And what about me? Will Eva be able to see my parents again?" The question broke my heart because I recognized in it the same dilemma I had faced. The love for family versus the need to protect oneself from their toxicity. "When you turn 18 in a few months," I explained carefully, "you will be a legal adult and you can make all your own decisions. If by then your parents have reflected and genuinely changed, if they have sought professional help to understand why they were willing to hurt their own family for money, then you can decide if you want to rebuild a relationship with them. And in the meantime," she asked with a maturity that impressed me more each day. "In the meantime," I replied, feeling a steely determination settle in my chest. "You're going to live with me. You're going to finish school. You're going to go to college. And you're going to learn that you are valuable for who you are, not for what you can give to others." That afternoon, while Stella was studying in the library, I walked alone through the inn's gardens, reflecting on the decisions I had made. It hadn't been easy to cut ties with my son, but it hadn't been easy to raise him alone. After being widowed, or to rebuild my life after every crisis. Women of my generation had learned that sometimes true love requires tough decisions. My phone vibrated with a text message from an unknown number. It was Linda writing from a different phone because I had blocked hers. "Jane, please, we just want to talk. Michael is very depressed. We can reach an agreement." I read the message without feeling the pang of guilt I had expected. Instead, I felt a crystal clarity about what I had to do. I didn't reply to the message. Instead, I sat on a bench under a mango tree and called Mr. Roberts to make sure all the legal documents were in order and that Stella was completely protected. When I finished the call, I took a deep breath of the pure mountain air and smiled. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what the future might bring. 2 weeks after our arrival at the Serenity Inn, the tranquility was broken in the most unexpected way. I was watering the plants in the small garden the innkeeper had allowed me to tend to when I heard the sound of a car coming up the gravel path. It wasn't unusual for new guests to arrive, but something about the engine's sound made me look up with apprehension. Linda and Michael got out of a rental car, but they were not the same people I had seen in the lobby of the Coastal Hotel. Linda had lost weight. Her clothes were wrinkled, and her hair, once always perfectly styled, hung lifelessly around her gaunt face. Michael walked with his shoulders slumped as if carrying an invisible weight that was crushing him. Down on the ground. "Mom!" Michael shouted from the parking lot. "We need to talk to you, please. Just 5 minutes." His voice sounded broken, very different from the calculating tone he had used on that desolate road. Linda stood by the car as if afraid to come any closer. Stella appeared on the inn's terrace, clearly alerted by the voices. Our eyes met, and I could see the internal conflict tearing her apart. Despite everything she had witnessed, they were still her parents. "Do you want me to talk to him?" she asked me with a maturity that broke my heart every day. "It's your decision, my love," I replied, setting the watering can down next to the bougainvillea. "But if you decide to, I will be right by your side." Stella nodded, and together we walked toward where Linda and Michael were waiting. "Stella, my girl," Linda said with a trembling voice, holding her arms out to her daughter. But Stella didn't run to her, as she had her entire childhood. Instead, she stood firmly by my side, taking my hand in a gesture of solidarity that spoke louder than any words. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, Dad," Stella said with a coolness that clearly surprised them. "How did you find us?" Michael looked at the ground before answering. "We hired a private investigator. What knew you had to be somewhere with your grandmother? You spent money. You don't have to find me." Stella observed with an insight that filled me with pride instead of using it to reflect on why I left in the first place. Linda flinched at her daughter's words. "Listen," I said finally, "you can talk, but it will be here in public with witnesses. I will not allow you to manipulate Stella in private." The owner of the inn, Mrs. Rosa, had appeared discreetly at the entrance, clearly prepared to intervene if the situation required it. Linda was the first to speak and her voice trembled with an emotion that seemed genuine. "Jane, these have been the worst days of our lives. We lost our jobs because we couldn't get back in time. The bank is threatening to foreclose on our house." "Stella," her voice broke. "Stella, your room is exactly as you left it. Every night I look at your empty bed and I realize what we lost." Michael took over and I could see real tears in his eyes. "Mom, I know what we did was unforgivable. I have no excuses. I let financial pressure and greed turn me into someone I don't recognize. I've betrayed everything you taught me about family and respect. And what do you expect me to do with this information?" I asked, not allowing emotion to cloud my judgment. "Feel sorry for you. Forget that you took me to an isolated place to threaten and rob me," Linda sobbed openly. But I had learned to distinguish between tears of remorse and tears of self-pity. "We don't expect you to forgive us immediately," Michael said. "But we hope you'll give us a chance to prove we can change. We've started family therapy. I have the receipts right here." He pulled several crumpled papers from his pocket. "We've also spoken with a financial counselor to learn how to manage our finances better without depending on anyone else." Stella spoke for the first time since the initial greetings. "And what about me? Do you expect me to come back as if nothing happened? As if I didn't hear you planning to abandon my grandmother on a road?" Her voice hardened with each word, "as if I didn't see your true faces when you thought you had won." Linda took a step forward, but stopped when Stella instinctively stepped back. "My love, we understand you need time. We didn't come here to demand you come back immediately. We came to beg for a chance to rebuild what we destroyed. Rebuilding takes time." I intervened, feeling it was time to set clear boundaries. "And it requires real changes, not just pretty words when things get tough." I looked Michael directly in the eyes. "Son, for 40 years, I gave you everything you needed. I paid for your education, helped you with the house, lent you money when Linda lost her job last year. And your thanks was to plan to rob me." "Well, there's no justification for what we did," Michael admitted. "But Mom, we were desperate. The credit card debts, the house payments, Stella's expenses. It all got out of hand." Linda nodded vigorously. "We thought if we had access to your money, we could fix everything quickly and then pay you back." "Pay me back?" I repeated in disbelief. "You were going to pay me back my own inheritance after stealing it." You were going to ask my permission to use my money after taking away my legal ability to say no." The silence that followed was deafening. Stella cleared her throat. "Mom, Dad, I want you to understand something. Grandma isn't keeping me here against my will. I'm here because this is the first time in my life I felt completely safe and valued for who I am, not for what I can give someone else." "Stella is right," I continued. "You can get all the therapy in the world, but until you understand that love isn't negotiated and family isn't extorted, there's no foundation to rebuild anything." I looked toward the mountain that rose behind the inn. "When you are able to love us unconditionally without hidden agendas, without plans for personal gain, then we can talk about second chances." Linda and Michael looked at each other and I could see that they were finally understanding the magnitude of what they had lost. It wasn't just money. It wasn't just access to a future inheritance. It was the trust, the respect, and the unconditional love of the two most important women in their lives. "How much time do you need?" "As much to me as it takes," I answered, "and maybe it will never be enough." 6 months later, I was in the garden of my new home, a small property I had bought on the outskirts of town, where Stella and I had found peace. It was a Sunday morning, and the aroma of fresh coffee mingled with the scent of the gardenias I had planted by the kitchen window. Stella was away at college studying psychology, motivated by everything we had been through together. The doorbell interrupted my morning routine. When I opened it, I found Linda and Michael standing on my porch, but they were completely different people from the ones I had seen 6 months ago. Linda had regained a healthy weight. Her hair was shining and her eyes had a clarity I hadn't seen in years. Michael stood with his back straight, his hands steady, and for the first time in a long time, he looked me directly in the eye. "Hi, Mom," Michael said in a calm voice. "We know you weren't expecting us, and we'll respect it if you don't want to talk." Linda nodded beside him. "We just wanted to bring you this," Linda added, holding out a sealed letter. "It's a formal apology, but it's also something more." I took the letter curiously, and invited them to sit on the wicker chairs on the porch, but I kept a certain distance. "How did you know where I live now?" "Mr. Roberts gave us your address," Michael replied. "But only after we completed the 6-month family therapy program and showed him the changes we've made." The letter contained much more than apologies. It was a detailed plan of how they had completely restructured their lives. They had sold the large house they couldn't afford and moved into a modest apartment. Linda had found a part-time job and was studying accounting online. Michael had taken a lower-paying position, but without the pressure that had led him to make desperate decisions. "We also included the reports from our therapists," Linda explained. "We don't expect you to just trust our words after what we did." Her voice was different, more mature, without that artificial sweetness she had used for years to manipulate situations. I read each page in silence while they waited patiently. The reports from the professionals were clear. They had done real work to understand the roots of their behavior. Linda had discovered that her obsession with financial status came from a childhood of hardship she had never processed. Michael had confronted his tendency to see money as the solution to all problems, a distorted perspective he had developed after his father's death. "And what do you expect from me now?" I asked, closing the folder. "Nothing," Michael answered immediately. "We don't expect instant forgiveness. We don't expect you to change your will. We don't expect access to your money. We only hope for the chance to rebuild a relationship over time if you decide. It's possible." Linda leaned forward in her chair. "Jane, over these months, I've understood something I never grasped before. I didn't respect you as a person. I saw you as a resource." Her voice broke slightly. "I never valued your sacrifices, your intelligence, your strength. I reduced you to a source of money, and I am deeply ashamed. And me," Michael added, "I never truly became an independent man. I kept expecting my mom to solve my problems like when I was a kid. That wasn't fair to you, and it wasn't worthy of me either." There was a long pause as I processed their words. Stella arrived at that moment coming home from college with her books under her arm. Seeing her parents, her expression remained neutral, but I could see a flicker of hope in her eyes. Mom." "Hi, Dad," she said simply, sitting in the porch step. "Hi, my love," Linda replied, tears in her eyes. "How are your classes?" It was a simple question, but one filled with respect for Stella's autonomy, very different from the demands and expectations of the past. "They're going well," Stella answered. "I'm majoring in family therapy. I want to help other families communicate better before they get to the point we did." Her words were like a soft dagger to Linda and Michael, but they also carried an implicit hope. I got up from my chair and walked to the porch railing, looking out at the mountains in the distance. Over these months, I said finally, I've had time to reflect on many things. I've remembered the boy I raised, Michael, before pressure and greed changed him. I've remembered the young woman I met when you started dating my son, Linda, before financial worries hardened her. It turned to face them. I can't pretend that what happened didn't happen. You betrayed me in the deepest way possible, but I also can't ignore that people can change if they truly commit to it. I paused, choosing my words carefully. I'm going to propose something, I continued. We can start with meetings like this once a month here on neutral ground. We will rebuild trust slowly, step by step. If after a year of these meetings, we all feel there is a solid foundation, we can consider a closer relationship. Linda and Michael nodded immediately. That's more than we deserve, Michael said. And we will completely respect your conditions. There's one more condition, I added firmly. We will never ever talk about money, inheritances, or wills. If that topic ever comes up, these meetings end permanently. Both of them nodded vigorously. Stella stood up and hugged me. Thank you, Grandma, she whispered in my ear. For giving us this chance, but also for teaching me that forgiving doesn't mean forgetting and that true love requires mutual respect. As Linda and Michael drove away, I stood in the porch with my granddaughter, watching the sun set behind the mountains. I didn't know if this second chance would work, but I had learned that hope, when managed wisely, was different from naivety. For the first time in a long time, the future felt full of possibilities instead of threats. And that in itself was a victory.